Hey, what's up there, YouTubers, and those who may be watching this on Facebook? It's me, Brian, aka Gamer55551, and I am back with a review slash thoughts for this video. So for this one, we're going to be taking a look at the Super NES games that are now available on the Nintendo Switch as part of excuse me a second, as part of Nintendo's online service. And if you're interested in any of the gameplay footage of me playing the games and all that stuff, I'll have a link in the description of this video, of this YouTube video, and you can check it out yourself. Ever since Nintendo's online service was launched, though, the service has kind of been met with mixed receptions. Not everyone is thrilled of Nintendo doing now a paid online service, when in the past with systems like the Wii, the Wii U, and the DS and 3DS at the time, it was basically for free and all that stuff. And there are certainly some decisions not everybody had agreed with. Some of the people were not thrilled with the idea of using your phone as voice chat and all that stuff, and I kind of agree with that argument to a certain degree. I feel like that's more work into it than it should be, though. But despite that, there are a couple things that does make the service good, and one of those, when the service launched, was the NES game collections, and these were a selection of games available that you could play as part of Nintendo's online service. Some of the games are classic iconics, like for me, Super Mario Bros. 3 which I still consider and hail as the greatest video game of all time. I know some people may disagree with me on that, but I'm standing behind that statement. Others are basically games that either some people are hidden gems to some, while others feel like, why is it in there and all that stuff. But either way, it was a nice feature to add, and it's certainly nice to relive some of those games and play them, even though some of them were available at the time of the NES Mini. But as the service continued and so forth, we also had rumors going around that Super Nintendo games could be coming to the Nintendo Switch as part of Nintendo's online service, although a lot of people have demand to have that happen, or at least asked for that to happen. And of course, we had the Super NES Mini, which was in limited quantities as well. And rumors kind of surfaced a little bit more earlier this year, but it wasn't until the recent Nintendo Direct that it was announced that Super Nintendo games would be available on the Nintendo Switch. And after waiting, we finally got the Super Nintendo games, and I will say, while some of the games may not live up to or don't have it as aged as well as some people would like it to be, this collection that they have so far, or at least what they put out, there is certainly nice, and it also packs in some new features. Not to mention, some of these new features also make their way over to the NES game collection. So why don't we get started with the pros and cons, and we'll start off with the pros. And I will say, for the pros, I will give it basically a good selection of games so far. I'm kind of surprised with the selection, though, and there are some pretty good ones in there. Some of them, like Super Mario Kart, Super Mario World, Yoshi's Island. The original Star Fox is it's nice in there. Super Metroid, The Legend of Zelda. Some that I never thought that they would even consider bringing over, like Joe and Mac 2, Lost in the Tropic. I had no idea that Nintendo would add that into there as well. Hopefully they'll bring the original Joe and Mac. That would be great if they could do that. One kind of surprise one area I was a little bit surprised to see them bring over is basically a Puyo Puyo game. And the thing is, this is a game originally from, I believe it was only released in Japan and never saw the light of day here in the West. So I'm a little surprised that Nintendo added that as well. So it's certainly interesting that they put that in there, and I would be open to more of those Japanese only games that never saw the light of day in the West added into that selection. Not to mention, I would also like to see some of that in the NES game collections as well. So I will say, as far as game selection goes, some of them are pretty good, and I would love, and hopefully we'll see more of that roster grow over time. And last but not least, as far as the Pro, they added a new feature which some may argue is cheating, but others might come in handy for some people, and that is a new feature such as the rewind. What basically happens is that if you kind of screwed up or something like that, or you've made a little boo-boo or whatsoever, you could do is hold down the ZL button, as you can see here on the Pro controller, or Cons.to, and you could rewind the game back 30 seconds to kind of sort of like if there was a jump you accidentally miss, or a certain error in the game and all that. Now, some may argue and say this is downright blatant cheating and all that stuff, and quite frankly, I don't disagree. And guilty as charged, I probably used this feature before. Pull something like this when playing Super Mario World 2 Yoshi Island, when doing like the flip cards and all that stuff, you know, to get certain items and all that stuff. Yeah, I know. It's blatantly cheating. I won't deny that or anything like that or all. But nevertheless, it is a nice feature for those who may have had a hard time with maybe a tough game in the past and figure this might help them or make them a little bit better. Again, I understand some people may view it as cheating, but some may view it as a helpful tool as well. It is also worth pointing out this feature is also available on the NES game collection as well, so you can use this feature on the NES game collection. On top of that, the game does have, you know, you could create your own save point in the game like you did with the NES game collection, so you could do this with the Super NES games too. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. When we get back, we're going to get to part 2, which are the cons. So we'll take a little bit of a break, and we will be right back. Okay, and we are back with part 2 of our video review and thoughts of the Super NES games on the Nintendo Switch as part of the Nintendo Online service. So now that I gave you the pros of what I did like, why don't we get started with the cons? I'm not going to add the con that's pretty obvious, and that is this feature is only available if you're part of Nintendo's online service. You paid for the service and all that stuff. Yeah, I know not everyone is going to be thrilled with that. Not everyone likes that idea, but unfortunately, that's how it is. If you want to play the NES or Super NES games on your Nintendo Switch, you're going to have to subscribe to Nintendo's online service. I know some people would argue, why not do the virtual consoles and so forth, and I don't disagree with that argument, to be exact. I'm not saying I'm against that argument at all, but unfortunately, it is what it is, though. So, but with that obvious con out of the way, while we get to the 3 cons I do have in terms of regards of the Super NES games on the Switch. The first one, which is kind of pretty obvious, is that not every game is going to appeal to everyone. While the game selection that they have there is pretty good, and a lot of classic ones like Star Fox, Super Metroid, Super Mario World, Yoshi's Island, as I mentioned, there may be some that may not appeal to everyone. Like, for example, as I mentioned earlier, Joe and Mac 2, Lost in the Tropic. Not everyone was a fan of that game. Not everyone enjoyed it. So some games may not appeal to everyone. Some may like some games, some may not. Excuse me. Some may not like the other. So there are going to be some games that will appeal to some people, and there will be some games that may not appeal to everyone. The next one, and this is kind of somewhat of a con, but not exactly, and this has to do with a change in the way Nintendo's handling NES and Super NES games going forward. In the past, though, Nintendo has kind of basically released a game every month and so forth and all that stuff. Whether you thought that was the game they should bring over or not, that's debatable at least. But now there is a change to this, and now Nintendo won't be releasing a new NES or Super NES game every month, which is kind of a disappointment to me, because I rather prefer the schedule approach rather than we wait 5 months down the road. I'm just throwing the number out there, and we don't see this feature updated to the point it is updated and all that stuff. So Again, it's their policy and so forth, but I'm not really a big fan of this approach. I would rather they do it like a schedule, like do one every month, even if it's one that, even if it's not like a famous title, or even if it's just a niche title and all that stuff. I still prefer that approach than what Nintendo is currently doing right now. And last but not least, and this has to do with one of the games released onto the Switch, onto the SNES games for the Nintendo Switch, and that is Puyo Puyo. Now, I'm not criticizing the game in general and all that stuff. It's fun, but I mean, if you played any other Puyo Puyo game you played, probably know the drill and all that stuff. The issue really has to do with the language barrier, as this is basically a game released supposedly only in Japan and all that stuff. And basically, now it's not a huge text reading or anything like stuff like an RPG. So some of it, despite some of the language barrier, though, it's easy enough to understand what's going on and all that stuff. That said, language barrier could be an issue if Nintendo decides to bring more of the games that were only released in Japan that never saw the light of day here in the West. That might be a problem, as I mentioned earlier, especially for games that are text heavy, like RPGs and all that stuff. So I'm not against them bringing more of these games over, like Japanese only games, and bringing them over to as part of the service. I would welcome that, even if they do that for the NES games on the Nintendo Switch. It's just that the language barrier might be an issue for some of these games. So, and if they're text heavy, though, that might be a problem for some people unless you understand, Japanese very well and so forth. Overall, I would say I am pleased with the Super NES games on the Switch that are available right now. They do have a good selection, and there are some that are, to me, instant classic like Super Mario World and Yoshi's Island, and of course Super Metroid and so forth. So it's not a very bad selection. I do like the fact that they added some new features like the rewind feature, although some will argue and say that's kind of cheating and so forth, which I kind of don't disagree to a certain extent, though. My issue really is, the two big issues is that the change in the policy that they have in terms of how they're going to distribute the NES and Super NES games as part of this service, not doing the monthly one, and that the language barrier, if they decide to bring more Japanese games over, could be an issue for some. It's not a huge one, but it can be an issue for certain people. But overall, I am happy with the current selection they have right now. I'm hopeful though that collection will grow over time, and I would be open to the idea if Nintendo were to do, like, say, a Game Boy collection or Game Boy games on the Nintendo Switch, Game Boy Advance on the Nintendo Switch, to even like the N64. I mean, that would be great if they do something like that, like an N64 games on the Nintendo Switch. So overall, I like what's available right now with these SNES games on the Nintendo Switch. I'm sure there are some that are iconic that some people will like, though, and here's to hoping to see that service grow, and here's to hoping to, like I said, to see something like Game Boy Advance, and of course, Nintendo 64. Okay, this concludes my review / thoughts on Super NES games on the Nintendo Switch as part of Nintendo's online service. And again, these are my opinion. What are yours? What are your thoughts about the service so far? Are you happy with the current selection they have right now for the Super NES games on the Nintendo Switch? Do you like the fact that they have now added a rewind feature on this? Would you like them to bring more Japanese-only games that were never saw in the West at the time, like Puyo Puyo? Do you think language barrier might be an issue for certain Japanese games, though? Do you agree with Nintendo changing their policy of not releasing a game every month or something like that? Do you agree with that? Do you disagree? Do you agree with what I said in this video? Do you disagree with what I said in this video? Do you have a difference of opinion? As always, sound off on the comment section below. Let me know what you think. And I hope you hit that like button. I would appreciate it. And I hope you do subscribe to my YouTube channel. And if you do, make sure you hit the bell icon for notifications of any new videos I put up. Also, feel free to share this video if you want to, and feel free to donate to my channel if you like. I will see you again next time when I do another video. Hopefully that will be soon. Until then, from Southern California, I wish you all a good day then. Bye!